Welcome back to N's NotebookLM. Have you ever had that feeling, that nagging suspicion that reality is, well, more than what we can see and touch? Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most mind-bending human experiences out there, the feeling that your consciousness has actually left your physical body. And we're going to start with an experience that completely shattered one man's world.
So to really get a handle on this, we're not starting with some dusty theory. We're starting with a jolt, a real shock to the system for a guy named Anthony Peake. Now, Peake was an author and researcher, and he was always fascinated by these kinds of states, but, from a distance, academically. That is, until one afternoon in Switzerland changed everything.
Okay, so picture this. Peake is trying out this device called the Lucia light stimulator. It's basically just flickering white lights, but his brain starts going wild, creating these incredible explosions of color. And then something shifts. He casually turns his head, and suddenly he's not in a room anymore. He is suspended thousands of feet in the air, looking down at this vast, bizarre, chessboard-like plane that just stretches out to a glowing horizon.
And this is where it gets truly weird. He could physically feel his hands gripping the arms of the chair in absolute terror. A totally real, physical feeling. But at the exact same time, another part of his awareness was just floating in a completely different reality. This one experience just blew his 56-year-old, totally secure worldview to pieces and made him ask a brand new question. What even is perception? What is real?
Now, you might be thinking this is some kind of one-off, a crazy fluke, but Peake's experience, as wild as it was, is not unique at all. These journeys where your consciousness seems to pop out of your body, sometimes they're called exochromatic experiences, they've been reported for centuries all over the world. They're not as rare as you might think, they're just not something we talk about much, and they come in all sorts of flavors.
Right, so you've got a whole spectrum of these things. Some just happen out of the blue, to people who are completely exhausted. There's this one story of a soldier in Malaya who was so worn out he turned around and saw himself, still sitting on his bunk. And then you have experiences that happen under the most extreme circumstances possible, at the very edge of life and death.
And it's really important to know the difference here. A classic out-of-body experience, or OBE, usually involves looking at our normal, everyday world, just from a weird perspective, like floating near the ceiling. But a near-death experience, an NDE, that's the whole shebang. It often starts with an OBE, but then it can go way beyond, into these otherworldly realms with tunnels of light, encounters with glowing beings, and even seeing your entire life flash before your eyes. Okay, so this brings us to the big problem, the central conflict in this whole story. On one side, you've got thousands upon thousands of incredibly powerful, life-changing personal stories. And on the other side, you've got science, which needs hard, repeatable, verifiable proof. And that, my friends, is where things get really, really tricky.
For example, you have the famous case of a woman named Maria. During a near-death experience in a Seattle hospital, she said she floated right out of her body through the hospital wall. She later described with incredible detail a single dark blue tennis shoe she saw sitting on a third-floor window ledge on the other side of the building, a spot there was no way she could have ever seen from her room. A social worker heard the story, got curious, and went to look. And, you won't believe it, she found the shoe, exactly where Maria said it would be, exactly as she described it.
So, a story like Maria's sounds like a slam dunk, right? Hard proof. But here's the thing. This number, 0, that's how many times a feat like that has been repeated under controlled scientific conditions. For years, researchers have been placing hidden pictures or cards on top of high shelves in emergency rooms. The idea is simple. If you float up to the ceiling during an OBE, you should be able to see it. To this day, not a single person has ever correctly identified one of those hidden images. Not one.
So we're kind of stuck, aren't we? We have these experiences that feel more real than real to the people having them, but they just seem to defy any kind of proof in our physical world. So, what if we're looking for the evidence in the wrong place? Maybe the answer isn't out there in the hospital room, but somewhere deeper, in the very fabric of reality itself.
All right, let's take a quick detour into the absolutely bizarre world of quantum physics. There's this thing called entanglement. It shows that two tiny particles can become linked, like cosmic twins, and if you check the state of one, you instantly know the state of the other, even if it's on the other side of the freaking universe. There's no travel time, it's instant. It suggests that on some deep level, everything is connected in a way that just breaks our normal rules of space and time.
Even Albert Einstein thought this was completely nuts. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He famously called it spooky action at a distance. But here's the kicker. Experiment after experiment has proven that this spooky connection is real. It's a fundamental part of how our universe works.
Building on this spooky connectedness, the physicist David Bohm came up with a mind-blowing theory that our universe works like a hologram. He said that what we see and experience, our reality, is what he called the explicate order. It's like the 3D image projected from a holographic film. But the film itself is a deeper reality, the implicate order, where everything is folded into everything else. And just like how a tiny piece of a hologram contains the whole picture, maybe every point in space actually contains all the information of the entire universe. If that's true, well then seeing something far away isn't so impossible after all.
Okay, so if this deeper, interconnected, holographic reality exists, how in the world do we access it? This leads to a totally radical way of looking at our own brains. What if the brain doesn't create consciousness? What if it's more like a highly advanced biological antenna, one that's designed to receive consciousness from this deeper field of reality?
So if the brain is an antenna, how does it work? What are the parts that do the tuning? Well, researchers are looking at a few fascinating candidates. You've got the pineal gland, this tiny little thing deep in the center of the brain that mystics have called the third eye or the seat of the soul for thousands of years. Then there's DMT, a chemical our own brains produce, which also happens to be one of the most powerful psychedelics known to man. And then, deep inside our neurons, we have these tiny structures called microtubules, which some scientists think might actually operate on a quantum level.
And this is where it gets really interesting. A psychiatrist, Dr. Rick Strassman, ran studies where he gave volunteers DMT. And he's come to believe that the pineal gland might release huge floods of this stuff at crucial moments, like birth and death. And what did his volunteers report? They reported journeys to other realities that they said felt more real than real. They met strange beings, and they experienced that classic sensation of being out of their body. It's like DMT could be the neurochemical key that unlocks the door to these other dimensions.
So all this leaves us with a pretty staggering question. If our brain really is a kind of biological antenna and chemicals like DMT are the tuning dial, could it be that these out-of-body experiences are just us, for a brief moment, changing the channel? Are we getting a quick glimpse of another reality that's just as real as our own, just broadcast on a different frequency? The science is nowhere near settled, but it really forces you to wonder, is the world we see every day really all there is? If this topic has captured your interest and you'd like to dive deeper, the book is called The Out-of-Body Experience: The History and Science of Astral Travel by Anthony Peake.